Hello and welcome. I'm Anna Towns. I'm the engagement specialist at Forsyth Library here on campus, and we are so excited to have you here for our next how-to event. This is Meeting Makeovers. These how-to events have been a partnership with the Forsyth Library and the Hayes Public Library, so thank you, Jessica Shields, for being here from the Hayes Public Library. I hope all of you got scanned in, and then we do have tickets for a door prize, so be sure that you got a ticket so that you can maybe win that door prize. And please help me in welcoming Nicole Frank, who will be leading this session.
Okay, thanks for coming out this evening. I know that you have other places you could be, and I'm thrilled that you're here. This session is going to be about how you can make over a meeting, and it's going to be very applicable or hands-on. And what I mean by that is I'm going to have you think for just a moment about a meeting that you have to attend or lead that drives you crazy. Okay? And I'm not going to ask you to share it because you may not want everyone in the room to know about this meeting. But just kind of get something in mind, because then you have a planning sheet in front of you, and what I'm going to have you do as we go through, in the order on the sheet, we're going to talk about each of these domains or areas or ways that you can improve a meeting. Okay? So I started looking at this topic in the summer of 2021. My partner and I were taking our kids to Florida, to Orlando for vacation. And we were doing it old school. We were road tripping. And so we wanted our kids to know what it's like to road trip from Kansas to Orlando, which is a really, let's just say, we learned a lot about road tripping with, I'm trying to think, that was 4 years, the kids would have been 14. I have twins. They had never stayed in motels. They'd been spoiled and stayed in hotels before, so they got to experience what it was like to stay in the kind of motels that I grew up staying in. My daughter's very dramatic and thought she was going to get shot because she's just an extra. And they argued and argued and argued and asked when we were going to get there and so on. But I was kind enough to share with my entire family audiobooks all the way there and back about how to improve meetings. They were so thrilled. The reason I was is because I was part of my job. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Hayes, and mainly that focuses on faculty development, although some of my work is for staff too, because we don't have a dedicated staff development coordinator or director here. And so part of my work is chairing the Faculty Development Committee. I have a background that should suggest that I know how to run a meeting. I was in 4-H for 8 years. I know parliamentary procedure fairly well. I still have some moments where I grab my Robert's rules and look them up. I was the president of Staff Senate here on campus. I should know how to run a meeting. And yet I didn't feel like I was doing the best job. And then I also felt like I attended meetings where maybe I couldn't completely control how they went, but I could improve them, because attending them was just mind-numbing or frustrating, or everyone was talking at once, or just whatever the situation was. So that all started in the summer of 21, and I've presented on this topic a couple of times since then, made a couple of little amendments or additions to it with more information about virtual meetings. But it is one of my favorite topics, because I think a poorly run meeting can make everyone miserable, and a well-run meeting can actually feel encouraging. So do you all have in mind some kind of a meeting that you want to make over? Okay, so you have your sheets. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you first. There's a list of resources on your very last page that's more comprehensive than this, but these are the 5 books that my lucky family got to listen to an audiobook, as much as they did without, the teenagers were, of course, turning on their own things. The Stephen Rogelberg book at the top left, The Surprising Science of Meetings, this has an academic business tone. I'm going to give you a little bit of context about each of these in case you're interested in them. So Stephen Rogelberg is a business professor. It's very accessible. It's not hard to read or understand. You don't need to be a business major to understand it, but it is traditional and it is academic in tone. The book in the center top, Priya Parker's The Art of Gathering, this came out in 2018. It's about all kinds of events. Conferences, weddings, baby showers, meetings, all kinds of gathering type of events. So So the ideas in it are a little more unconventional. They're a little more creative. Some of them may not be applicable to meetings because they just, what you're going to do at a wedding is not going to be the same at a business meeting or a student org meeting, for example. But some great fun ideas. Thrive, the book on the top right by Mark Smutney, that book is all about inclusion. So what I took from this book especially is how to create an environment that is inclusive. And some of that deals with how you lay out a room, the kinds of tables that you use, how you make sure to include people who are quieter. Sometimes there's a cultural situation. So for some people, from their background, it's rude to share an idea without being explicitly invited to first. But the suggestions from this book, the great thing is they work for just general getting everyone's ideas just as well as they do for maybe disadvantaged groups. Rituals for virtual meetings is just what it sounds like. I brought that in because this was 2021. This was directly after the pandemic. I think I worked remotely from spring of 20, March of 20, all the way through August of 21. So when I took this vacation, I was just preparing to come back to campus. I worked remotely for a year and a half. So virtual meetings were still certainly very fresh on our minds, and I attend more virtual meetings today than I ever did before that. Please take note of the rituals in the title. This does have some feel-good kumbaya stuff. Like, let's all meditate together at the beginning of this meeting. So it is a little bit different purpose of a book, but I still found some things that were useful. And then the last one, Bad Meetings Happen to Good People by Lee Espy. This is like a non-academic version of Steve Rogelberg's book. So it's still very traditional and businessy in context, but it's a little bit more layperson. Lee Espy is a project manager. So she's more of a practitioner, whereas Stephen Rogelberg is a scholar. Neither book is hard to understand, but they have a different tone. Hers is a more casual tone. So those would be the key pieces of information I used putting this together. So planning and priming. If you look on your sheet, this is where we're beginning our work in your own planning. Priya Parker says that 90% of success is based on preparation. I think several people have said something like that along the years, right? But she's talking specifically about a meeting or a gathering, that 90% of success is based on preparation, and that you're not just going to plan, but you're going to prime. So you're going to set a tone for people and an expectation for people who are coming to your event about what they should expect. Let me give you some kind of fun examples. Priya Parker shared the example that when Disney sent out invites for the Star Wars The Force Awakens premiere, the invite language included, parking for your land speeder, sand crawler, or other transportation vehicle will be provided. So that's a playful tone, right? That's not a serious tone, that's a playful tone. What makes sense? It's a movie premiere. Okay, so that's something that you do in the space of priming. You also communicate expectations. If you say, let's have a brainstorming session, that's a lot different expectation and clue and prime to your attendees than let's have a business meeting or let's have a workshop, right? Brainstorming means people expect to be they know that they're expected to engage, they're expected to come with ideas and to share those ideas. They're not expected to just listen and sit back. So you prime people by telling them what to expect of the meeting itself, okay? And then lastly, looping in important people that won't be invited, who won't be invited, excuse me. One of my favorite parts across all of this research is stop having such big meetings when you don't need to have such big meetings, okay? Some meetings on campus, this is just part of the job. I have no choice but to try to create a meeting invite for 13 faculty and staff members. And believe it or not, that can be really hard to do, especially when a couple of those people are across border, so they work at our campuses in China. They're 12 hours ahead of us at any given time. So we're asking them to meet sometimes at 9 p.m. or at 6 a.m. or something like that. Okay. Sometimes it's not avoidable. In the faculty development committee, I have no choice. I have to try to get everyone on that committee to those meetings. I have to create the most accessible time available. But other times we create these huge groups of people and it doesn't really serve any purpose. So what you can do instead is think about the people, and we'll get a little bit into how you decide who's invited, but think about the people that don't need to be invited, but you need their input. Ahead of the meeting, you can loop them in. Reach out to them and say, hey, we're going to have this meeting. I know you have a lot to do. I'm not expecting you to attend, but I'd like to know what you think about this. Or what are some questions I should ask the attendees about this? Okay, different things like that. I'll give you an example. So I have one direct report, a faculty developer alongside me, and she focuses on adjunct work, among other things. I used to have her position. I was promoted to my current position in 2017. And the first year or two out of my position, I continued to attend the Adjunct Faculty Advisory Committee meetings, as well as my own faculty development committee meetings. I didn't want to leave that person stranded. I didn't want to abandon them. But what became really obvious is as I sat in those meetings, every time there was a question about how we support adjuncts, adjunct training, adjunct recognition, everyone was turning and looking at me because I've been doing the job for 4 years. So I didn't feel like they were ever going to see this new person as the adjunct expert or specialist if I didn't quit attending those meetings, right? They were still turning to me all the time. So I ducked out of those meetings after 1 year with my new hire. I stayed on for 1 year, and then I said, hey, anytime that you have a question before you have a committee meeting, or you want to know some historical information about how we've been doing that work for the last 12 years since I've been here, reach out, talk to me. I'm happy to talk to you ahead of time. Anytime you want to debrief afterwards, we can talk afterwards. But there's no reason for me to attend all your meetings. Okay, does that make sense? Did something similar in Staff Senate. We have, Staff Senate has a faculty Senate rep. But as president of Staff Senate, I noticed if I attended Faculty Senate, people didn't turn to the Faculty Senate rep and say, Brett, what do you have on us from Staff Senate? They always turned to me because I was the president. So I had to remove myself from those meetings so that the faculty senators would see that rep as the person to reach out to and to ask questions of, because that was his role. Okay, so let's get on to purpose in people. How you decide the people that you want to include. The first piece of advice I'll give you is let purpose be your bouncer. And the determination of this, or the definition of this is, for every person attending, every person you invite, there should be a purpose for that person attending. Why do I want this person there? What purpose are they serving at this meeting? So if you come up with a list of 8 people in a meeting, you should be able to come up with a reason for every single one of those people being invited. Unless you are in those situations where you have to try to include all 12 people because they're part of a committee. And that's where we do more of this on subcommittees than we do on the larger committee. So let purpose be your bouncer. The 8-18-1800 rule, the last part 1800 might as well be a million. This has to do with purpose, and let me see if I can see where this is from. I believe this is from Steve Rogelberg. A common suggestion is to limit a meeting to 8 people when you want to make a decision or solve a problem, 18 when you want to brainstorm, or 1800 when you want to announce some kind of good news. If you've ever been to any of the press announcements here on campus when someone donates a big gift, several $1 million to the university, you'll see that an invite goes out to the entire campus. It's down in the atrium, usually on the first floor of the Union, and you can have gobs and gobs of people. Because you're not expecting any interaction, you're just sharing good news, okay? But 8 when you want to make a decision or solve a problem, 18 when you're brainstorming, and 1800 if you're announcing some kind of good news or you're rallying troops to a cause, but you don't need any response from them. You're just sharing information with them. The last 2 go together, the kindness of exclusion and how to include uninvited but important people. So what I was talking about earlier, Priya Parker talks about the kindness of exclusion. And it sounds like it's a contradiction in terms, but what she's referring to is this. And we struggle with this a lot at Fort Hays. We don't have the most diverse faculty and staff here. We don't have the most diverse student body here compared to some larger cities. So when I put together, let's say, a team of people who are going to advise me in terms of faculty development about tenure processes. And tenure, we have a really strong tenure rate here. About 95-96% of faculty achieve tenure who are on the tenure track. We boast it that's a great rate. But there is, just like most schools, just like across the country, when you look at gender and when you look at race or disability status, you see fewer people represented at higher ranks. So when you move from assistant professor to associate, to full professor, to department chair, to dean, to provost, across the country, you see fewer women, you see fewer disabled persons or other abled persons, you see fewer LGBTQ identifying individuals, and so on. So one of the things I think about in terms of tenure and promotion is how I can make sure that I'm including a variety of voices in that programming. So Priya Parker's point is this. If you try to create a diverse committee or a group of people for a meeting, let's say that you say, I want to make sure I have people of color there. I want to make sure I have women. I want to make sure I have men. I want to make sure I have a veteran. A veteran experience is a unique experience. Now you have this really diverse group of people. What happens when you add 15 more to this group of 8? You just diluted all these voices. Does that make sense? Because now, instead of this small group of 8, we have 23 people competing for a voice. Does that make sense? Give me like a thumbs up, thumbs down, nod, shake. Okay. So her point is that exclusion is actually kind when you're trying to sharpen voices from a variety of people. You can still reach out to important people ahead of time and afterwards, but if you want to make sure, especially in an environment where you have a rather homogenous group, like at Fort Hays, if you want to make sure that you sharpen that diversity and you get to hear those voices, don't add another 15 random people to the mix when you just created this really nice diverse group. Okay? You added a veteran because you wanted to hear a veteran voice. You're not going to add 15 more non-veterans and sharpen that voice. You're going to weaken it. Okay? So that's the kindness of exclusion. Including the uninvited but important people. So that is, again, reaching out to collect input ahead of time and then keeping them in the loop on decisions made. Many times this will be, any of you lead a student organization? How many of you lead a student? It looks like we have a lot of students in here. Okay. Any of you are part of a student organization where you hold meetings? Okay. So this might be something like reaching out to the staff member that your organization reports to, like maybe someone in student affairs, and asking them for guidance before a meeting. I can tell you, and I've been guilty of this myself, administrators need to stay out of meetings more often, okay? Sometimes they don't do any good by coming in a meeting because students get quiet. You get pretty people at higher levels coming into a meeting, and people who are at entry level get quieter. It's just the nature of a power differential. Okay, so reach out to that person ahead of time, ask them for ideas about the meeting, connect with them afterwards, and share decisions that were made. Types of meetings: standing meetings, walking meetings, and virtual meetings. Standing meetings are great when you want a short check-in. I had my very first supervisor at Fort Hays held a standing meeting every Tuesday and Thursday, every single Tuesday and Thursday. I will share with you, because I no longer report to him and he would laugh and want me to share this, that one of the reasons he did this was we were all late to work all the time, and he wanted us to stop being late. And so we're supposed to come in at 8 o'clock, we're meandering in at 8:03, 8:15, 8:20, and when you don't punch a clock, you can get fairly casual about such things, and he didn't like that casual attitude. So he scheduled an 8:05 standing meeting every Tuesday and Thursday. Okay? And our standing meetings were literally standing. We stood outside our offices and we caught each other up on what we were working on. We had a once a month real meeting, a substantive meeting, a beefy meeting, where we talked about everything and made decisions. But these were 15-minute standing meetings where we all kind of did a round robin and just shared what we were working on. So they can be a quick check-in, they should not be long. When you think about different people in your meeting, make sure to think about physical ability or disability. I do work with one gentleman who is 85 years old. I would not hold a standing meeting without putting a chair or a stool outside his office or offering him one, because asking him to stand for 15 or 20 minutes might not be a particularly enjoyable thing. So think about needs. Everyone doesn't have to literally be standing. The point of standing is just that it's a very brief meeting and it's more of a check-in. Walking meetings inspire creativity. So if you want people to put their phones down, put their laptops away, not necessarily look you in the eye, they actually are parallel to you in a walking meeting, which helps creativity because people can think better. And physical activity, motion, sparks creativity. So people are less likely to be distracted because they can't sneak and look at their phone without you seeing it. And they're more likely to be creative because of the physical motion. It's best to keep this to a small group of people. We couldn't take this whole room and be like, let's go have a walking meeting down to Starbucks, right? We would just look like a big caravan. You guys would be talking to each other in twos. We wouldn't be able to have a meeting. But I could grab 2 of you and we could walk down to Starbucks and we could talk about something. Okay, that would work. So 2 or 3 people, that will work. A big group, that's not going to work. Try to find an outdoor space, because fresh air and sunshine also boost creativity. Now, get into February, take that with a grain of salt. Ben Franklin took his daily constitutionals, his walks, regardless of the weather. So there's something to be said for that. But, do keep the weather in mind. Try to find a closed loop. The best walking meetings are around a closed loop. Okay? So if you have something that because it has a clear beginning and end. And if you don't, then you can use the there and back type of method. So I work in Hammond Hall. When I have a walking meeting with someone, it is with intention to Starbucks and back. And if I ask them for a walking meeting, I offer to buy them a cup of coffee, okay? But because we don't have a closed loop other than, hey, let's go out to do you guys still call it the Hyper? You don't call it that anymore, do you? Gross Coliseum? Yeah, okay. Back in the 90s, we called it the Hyper. You walk around the track that's around the court, okay? I mean, I guess you could do that. I don't think that I'd bother driving out there just for a meeting. But we do see people walking around our building for like walking exercise with their tennis shoes. I could easily do that. People that I know would be good for that. Or I really like, when I need to be creative, getting outside of Hammond Hall and going down by the, like the dike and the creek there, because there's a whole path down there. Okay, and it's like a reset for me. Okay, so sometimes I'll walk down there and have a walking meeting with people. But shoot for a closed loop or a there and back. Okay, let me pause for a second. What questions do you have right now? Any questions? Yeah.
I'm a chronic note taker, so the idea of like standing or walking is worrying to me. Sure. Do you have any tips? Like, do you record meetings and listen back to them, or?
I have. I've used voice memo on my phone. You could, yeah. It depends on the people you're with too. In some walking meetings, I'm being asked to take notes, and I have to do that because that's just the nature. Everyone gets the coffee sometimes, as they say, and definitely maybe, right? Sometimes I get to be the one to say, hey, could you take notes while we do this? Or could you grab your phone and record this just in case there's anything we come up with? Obviously, you can't take thorough minutes in that environment, but yeah, that's a good idea. Anything else? Okay, virtual meetings. I think you probably know the benefits of virtual meetings, especially because you are the pandemic generation, right? We can get a lot more people to a virtual meeting than we ever could a physical meeting. It's more accessible. When I have, all of our faculty development committee meetings are now on Zoom, which was not the case before the pandemic. So we might have faculty members who are at home getting their kids ready for school at 7 in the morning. We might have other ones who are in their offices. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and they're wrapping up for the day. Anyone can attend one. They can attend them from outside of town. They can attend them from China. They can attend them from anywhere, right? You do have to be more intentional about engagement with a Zoom meeting. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has pulled up work on my other monitor or split my screen and done something else. And then someone says, Nicole, what do you think about that? Let's see, where are we on the agenda? We're human, right? It's so easy to do that. So you do have to be more intentional about engagement. Any of you take an online class that ever had a synchronous meeting? So you had to be online on Zoom or some other video conferencing platform every Tuesday night or something like that. And you have a faculty member who's like constantly having you do checks or drop something in the chat or whatever. Okay, that's what they're doing. They're trying to keep you engaged, all right? Oh. Okay, so location. There are a couple of things here. Location nudges purpose. So you consider what the purpose is and you decide your location based on that, because location is going to speak to your people and tell them the purpose. I didn't know the arrangement of this room before I came over. I use this room a lot for programs I'm in charge of. And so I had to think ahead of time because I hadn't asked and I didn't think about it until a couple of hours ago. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do if they're in round tables? What am I going to do? This is called a classroom set, because you all have a writing surface, but you're all facing the front. What am I going to do if they're in a theater set, which is like this, but with no writing surface? Okay, so I had to kind of think that through. If you have people in round tables, and here I have I was an English major at Fort Hays, so the Knights of the Round Table are dear to me. So here I have a Lego round table. If you have people in a round table, that's going to work better for a workshop or anything involving interaction. Sometimes this is hard because in an hour-and-a-half workshop, you're going to have some slides, you're going to have time when people interact with each other and back and forth. So you have to decide what's the best arrangement. It is irritating if people walk in, I'm sure you've had this happen, you walk into a round table arrangement and then you're craning your neck the whole time because the presentation's at the front and you're not expected to interact with people at all. And you see people scooting their chairs around the sides of the tables and writing like this, right? So as much as you can, consider how the location can help your purpose. Location also affects association. This is from Priya Parker. Have any of you attended a conference before, like more than one day especially? Gone to a conference? Okay. Think about, have you ever had the experience, this is what Priya Parker says, and I've certainly had this experience, where later after the conference, you remember something you learned at that conference, and you remember the room you were in when you learned it. Whether it was a ballroom and it was a keynote speaker, or it was that weird drafty room on the second floor that there weren't enough seats in, right? So what she says is that people will have an association between what they remember learning and the location they were in when they remember learning it. So if you have a longer form meeting, think about how location serves association. This is where you might have more than one location. When we hold professional development days on campus, we have breakfast and lunch in the ballroom, we have keynotes on Zoom, and we have all of our sessions in these rooms and then in some academic rooms in McCartney and Albertson. Okay, and we use those rooms with intentionality. So we use this room as a workshop type room because we can arrange the tables however we want. Okay, we use McCartney 104, which has almost like an auditorium set for something where there's not going to be much interaction between people, and so on. Okay, so location affects association. Consider accessibility. I chaired a regional conference here at Fort Hays in the fall of 19, and so I had about 200 people coming from all over the Midwest. And I looked at a campus map, and I hope it's better by now, but I looked at a campus map at the time, and I wanted to make sure to tell people where the accessible entrances were. I knew I had some people who used wheelchairs attending, and so I wanted to make sure that I was taking care of them. If you are not from Fort Hays and you are across campus, you might think that downstairs, the door directly outside of, what am I thinking of, Starbucks, you might think that door, you go out there and there's like a zigzaggy ramp. If you're out in the quad, you might think that's an accessible door. But at least in 2019, by the time you wheel a wheelchair back and forth up that ramp, you get to the top and there's no button to open that door. The accessible door, at that time at least, was over by Victor E. Apparel. And so I took a campus map and marked accessible entrances on it for all the buildings we used, because I didn't want anyone to get a wheelchair all the way up that ramp, get to the top, and there's no button there. First of all, that makes my university look bad, and I'm not going to let that happen. And secondly, I'm just not going to let that happen to a person, right? So consider accessibility when you consider location. Establish a parameter. Circles and ovals work best, like the Knights of the Round Table. The legacy of the Knights of the Round Table, the idea was that there's no head. Everyone is equal, right? Everyone shares. But a perimeter can be anything. You establish a perimeter and you close the perimeter. You don't have to have a room necessarily. You don't have to have a table. One of the examples given in one of the books is a blanket can work as a perimeter, which is funny until you think about how kindergarten teachers use a mat for story time, right? And the students know exactly where their little butts belong during story time. They belong on the mat. They even know what color they're supposed to sit on because they're assigned a space, right? You don't have to have a wall necessarily. You just have to have some kind of perimeter. And then you need to close the perimeter. So let's think, round is ideal, round or oval. Let's say you have a rectangular table. What you're supposed to do in this case is the picture at the left. Don't leave open ends. When you leave open ends with 6 people on a rectangular table like this, people are more likely to turn and talk to a neighbor who's next to them or across from them. So you want everyone engaging together and not having little side conversations. What you need to do is close that perimeter by pulling those chairs around to the ends. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. In terms of agenda, you want to, this is where I think things get the most wrong. You ever been in a meeting where things are completely off the agenda and there's 10 minutes left and you're on item 2 out of 10, right? Keeping people on the agenda. Make the agenda, work the agenda. One mistake I realized I was making when I first did this reading was I loved using a standing agenda for the committee that I chair, because I didn't have to create an agenda every month. But the problem is when you have a standing agenda, no one reads it because it's stale. They know exactly what's on it. You use the exact same thing every month. Okay, so a piece of advice here would be to avoid a standing agenda. Vary the agenda at least a little bit. Okay, consider the order on the agenda. Put the most important items at the beginning. This can be really important if you have a voting group where you have a quorum, because people might need to leave early. We had rather colorful staff senate meetings a few years ago. They were good. You could have sold tickets to them. They were interesting. Any of you remember in your school districts when maybe school board got a little interesting? Okay, city commission sometimes gets interesting. So we had some rather interesting meetings, and we had some people attending who were not senators who had a voice and they wanted to share that, but they were so verbal and they did not keep to the one comment kind of norm or rule I was trying to set. And they spoke early in the agenda because they were able to ask the Vice President of Finance questions. We almost didn't get to a vote one time when our Vice President, our President-elect, had to leave. We barely made that vote before he had to leave. And once he left, we wouldn't have a quorum. We would have had to delay that vote a whole month. Okay, so what we did was we copied SGA, thank you SGA. I talked to Edie McCracken and she told me about how they do things. And we copied City Commission and County Commission and School Board by taking the open talking time where anyone who's not a senator can speak and putting it at the very end. Okay, so now we still have time and you can stay and we'll listen, but we're not going to do that when we haven't taken a vote on important things or covered important things. Okay, so consider the order. Timed agendas can be helpful, they can also be really tough. There used to be a department chair, eventually became a dean on this campus who used timed agendas, and I'm telling you, she stayed with those timed agendas and you knew her meetings weren't going to go over. They can be constrictive if a discussion is going to take longer than the 3 minutes that you've allotted to it, but you can try them and play with them, okay, see how they work. At the beginning of the meeting, review the agenda, and this says rules, but you can also say norms, okay? Review the agenda and review the norms that you expect people to engage in. If you have a difficult group of people who are not being nice to one another, I highly recommend looking up something called the Norms of Collaboration. Okay, it's a document that comes out of education research. You can just type in Norms of Collaboration online, and you'll find it. It's very well known, and it has like 7 or 8 different norms. It involves things like presuming that other people have the best interests in mind, not assuming that they have negative plans or nefarious plans, seeking logic and understanding and fact rather than trying to win an argument, things like that. It's called the Norms of Collaboration. So reviewing norms or rules at the beginning of a meeting. Here's how we're going to conduct business today. You know, one other thing we did in that staff senate situation was we moved all of this is also from SG, I think, Ian McCracken shared. We took all of the people who were attending who were not senators and we created a gallery and we bumped them right there to the back of that room. And then senators were up here with name placards to clearly identify who they were. Okay, so we removed the attendees who were not senators and put them in a gallery area. And that created a distance that made a more efficient meeting. Sounds a little bit cruel, but part of my point was people who ran for a staff senate position should have a certain place and purpose in a meeting that guests do not. Okay, put the purpose at the top. When I was chairing that regional organization, I put our mission statement at the very top of our agendas, and that was a recommendation that came to me from Dr. Teresa Clouch, who used to be an AVP in student affairs here. She had worked with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and they had a hard time making decisions. They wanted to do all the things and fund all the things as a civic organization, and they had a hard time deciding what to fund and what to say no to. And so she created table tents for the Big Brothers and Big Sisters meetings that had their mission statement on it. Okay. When I was chairing that organization, we met on Zoom because this was about 20 people on the steering committee from Kansas, Missouri, Indiana, and so on. So I put the mission statement at the top of the agenda to remind us of what we were together for. And then the parking lot method, you don't have to use that title if you find it corny, but all it means is if we're sitting here and we're having a meeting and someone raises their hand or otherwise identifies they want to speak and brings up something that has nothing to do with the issue at hand, or it's going to derail us, then you can say, you know what, I'm going to put that in the parking lot and I'll come back to it. Or you can just say, you know what, let me pin that and we'll come back to it. Jot it down, make sure you're good as your word, because then people will respect you and know you're credible, and then come back to it at the end of the meeting. Don't let them derail your meeting. Okay? Don't let people derail your meeting. So, also on the agenda, consider what's called the issue, goals, and process method for crafting something more targeted. Okay? So the idea here is that we often keep agendas really vague, and I'm guilty of this in the past myself, because I like to make sure, if I'm the chair or the president, that what I'm presenting is not already on the piece of paper in front of you. Otherwise, why'd you have to come to the meeting? Okay? One thing you'll see if you're ever part of a shared governance group is the real agenda and the executive team's agenda, right? Do you know what I'm talking about? And the executive team agenda has all of the things that the president is actually going to say, if in bullet format, maybe in red text, underneath all of the items in the outline. Okay? Because I'm going to make sure that I let the treasurer and the president-elect and the secretary know what it is that we're going to actually say. Okay? So that extra information is something that you feel like, if I'm going to put all that on the agenda, it's going to be 4 pages long, and people are going to wonder why they even come to the meeting. But don't get so vague that you end up with a discussion that goes on and on. So here's an example. Let's say our agenda item is long-term employee recognition. Instead of just putting on the agenda, we're going to recognize, let's say, long-term student employees, students who've been employed, they're graduating, they've been employed at Fort Hays for all 4 years. Okay? But I don't say that. I just say long-term student employee recognition. Now, I want you to brainstorm, but the conversation could go all over the place. Are we going to share their names? Are we going to post them publicly? Are we going to give them an attaboy? Are we going to announce them at graduation or commencement? What are we going to do? If instead I drill down with some ideas that I put out there, issue at the top, the goal is how will we celebrate people, and this example, this is a business example, what gifts shall we give to employees with 20 plus years of service? Or at Fort Hays, what gift could we give to students who are graduating with 4 years of employee service with the university? Now you come to that meeting, you see this on the agenda, and your gears are already working about what gifts we could give. And the discussion may take us a different place. Someone may say, you know what, I think that we should recognize people who've worked at the university 3 years. Hardly anyone makes it 4. Let's cut that down. Okay? Or I don't think we should do a gift, I think we should do a verbal recognition. It could change. But I've at least set a tone that's a little tighter and a little narrower in scope, so that hopefully we don't discuss for an hour all the different ways that we could recognize a long-serving employee. Does that make sense? If we narrow the intent down a little bit, or the purpose down a little bit. Okay, openings. Always begin on time. I didn't used to do this. I used to always wait a couple minutes for more people to come. But the only problem with doing that, do you guys still have alpha-gan time? Good. We used to have in the 90s, I was not guilty of it, by the way, alpha-gam time. It did not mean early. I probably don't have to tell you that, right? It meant 5 to 7 minutes late, at least. When you begin your meetings on time, people start showing up on time. Or they at least understand they're going to miss a couple minutes. Okay? So begin on time. Connect people to the purpose and to each other right away, and consider methods for connecting virtually. You can have people say hello to each other in the chat. You can have people share what they're there for, what their purpose is, or what they're hoping to gain from the meeting. Avoid too much small talk. One of the meetings that drove me crazy when I began doing this work that I don't have control over was led by someone who began every meeting talking endless small talk. We're talking 10 minutes of small talk. And everyone in the room had this uncomfortable, frustrated, let's get on with it, what are we here for? Yes, we know the weather's nice, I'm fine, yes, on, let's go. Because they had places to be, they had things to do. They did not want 15 minutes of small talk in an hour-long meeting, or 10 minutes of small talk. So avoid too much. Avoid opening without opening. So Priya Parker makes the point that you should have a clear opening and a clear closing. This doesn't have to be anything more complicated than, hey everyone, welcome to the meeting. Put your name and your department in the chat. Put your name and your student org in the chat. Or come on in, and teachers use something called an anticipatory set sometimes, or a hook. to get students primed for the discussion for the day or the topic for the day, you can have a question on here that you have people think about. Welcome, come on in, sign in at the front, or pull up your cork and check in, and then spend a couple minutes thinking about the question on the screen. And then what I'm going to do when I start is begin with responses to this question, right? Okay. There needs to be some kind of a clear opening. And avoid logistics and announcements, okay? Only because they're dull. Logistics and announcements are considered dull. This is a really hard one to avoid in my experience. It's a natural thing to cover logistics at the beginning of a meeting and the end of a meeting. Okay? They're not wildly inspiring. That's kind of the point. So try to avoid them as much as you can. Some examples from the text, and I think these are from the virtual meeting book. One called Hi by Name. If you've ever seen the example on a Zoom meeting where everyone starts talking at one time, okay, this can fix that. Everyone comes in on mute. And then we say hi by name. Hi, I'm Nicole. And then I leave my hand up that says that I've spoken, and I choose someone to introduce themselves next. Okay. Hi, I'm Nicole. I work in TILT, Teaching Innovation Learning Technologies. I'm the Director of Professional Development. Okay. And then I pass the baton, and I leave my hand up on Zoom so you can see that I've already spoken. Another one, at an opening, each member can share what they're hoping to get out of the meeting, and then at the end, they can share what they did or did not get out of the meeting. You might want to think carefully about the groups that you use that in and how honest people can be. What they did or did not get out of the meeting, and then how they hope to meet any unmet needs. So sometimes in the committees I'm on, people might have unmet needs about clarity at the end of a meeting. They might say, well, I'm still not understanding how we're addressing faculty morale about scholarship. Faculty are really frustrated. They're trying to find time to publish their papers, and it doesn't sound like we're addressing it. But here's where I'm going to go to try to get some answers. Okay, that might be a for instance. Okay, so begin the meeting with what you hope to get out of it, and end with what you did or did not get out of it, and how you're going to meet unmet needs. Maintaining attention and participation, giving people a portion of the agenda to lead. I don't like this presentation for only one reason, and that's because I talk the whole time. Okay? I talk the whole time. It's flexible, it's versatile, because I can do this with 4 people or 40 people, because I'm not relying on groups to put together. Okay? And hopefully you take away a blueprint for a meeting you're going to actually improve. But it's really nice when I have a committee meeting and I can turn the subcommittee reports over to the subcommittee chairs. Okay. I feel like they're more engaged in the meeting, they have more ownership, it's not me talking the whole time. Invite people to lead a portion. Inviting people to share and taking a break to review to share document discussion. In one of our last meetings in the Faculty Development Committee last year, there was one subcommittee that had been asking all of us to weigh in on a proposal for a faculty liaison program. None of us had done it before the meeting. None of us, myself included. We just hadn't gotten to it. It was May, faculty are grading, it's just busy. So we literally stopped in the middle of the meeting and I said, okay, we're gonna take 10 minutes right now and we're gonna go to this Google Doc and we're all going to make comments and then we're gonna come back into the meeting. Because why not just get it done now? Okay, and it actually acted as a little breather in the meeting. We weren't all talking, we took 10 minutes, it was totally silent. I think we were doing 7 or 8, and everyone made comments, and then that subcommittee got what they needed. If you feel like people are zoning out, you can review a shared document of the discussion so far. Like if you keep minutes, any of you keep minutes in a meeting? Okay, bless you. That is the hardest, most important job of all. I often think that before someone should be a president, they should be a secretary, because you are a much better president than you've been a secretary. Suddenly you say, motion made by this person, seconded by this person, so the secretary doesn't have to look up all the time, right? You get a lot better at being a president when you've been a secretary. But if you are a secretary, you know that taking, and if you've ever taken minutes in a Zoom meeting, you know that if you take minutes on a screen with 50 people watching, it can be a little, I don't know, nerve-wracking. Suddenly you can't spell 3-letter words or 5-letter words because the whole group's looking at it. But you can go ahead and pull this up. If meeting's lagging, people are zoning out, say, you know what, let's pull up what we have so far in this discussion. This person's been taking minutes. Let's take a look at what we have so far. Everyone take 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and let's review that. And she shares her screen, he shares his screen, and you take a look at those. Okay? And then pop back out and take your minutes in a different space. I've learned that one the hard way, unfortunately. Inviting people to share their ideas. Make sure you try to hear from people who haven't shared. Okay? Ask them by name, what do you think? I really like this mutual invitation method. And this is what this looks like. If we're in a circle, and let's say I have a mic, ideally I have a mic, okay, in this situation, especially if it's a big group, and I share my idea, and then I hand the mic to anyone who's not on my right or left, and I say, would you like to share, pass, or pass for now? Now, first of all, why am I not handing it to my right or left, especially in a circle? They could hand it back to me. If the mic's going around in a circle and you see it coming towards you, are you focusing on what people are saying? Are you counting the people away from you before you need to come up with something to share? You're doing that, right? You're thinking about what you're going to share. So I'm going to hand that mic to someone who's not on my right or my left. And I'm going to say, would you like to share, pass, or pass for now? And that makes people feel a little bit less intimidated or threatened by being asked, because they can share their ideas. They can say, no, I'm going to pass, but at least you invited them. Or they can say, I'd like to pass for now. And then at the end, when everyone has shared who'd like to, you revisit those people who passed for now, and now they may have some ideas, because everything everyone else shared percolated a little bit, right? They had some time to think about it. Or they can decide they want to pass entirely. But that gives them a chance to share after they've had some time to sit back and listen to others. So that's what mutual invitation is called. Share, pass, pass for now. Okay, closings. End on time, just like you begin on time, because it shows that you respect people's time and they come to expect it of you. Avoid closing without closing. So another situation that I was kind of inspired by was I attended these meetings, I don't anymore, for the longest time, and this kind of led into the 2021 reading, where the person who led the meeting regularly got to the end of the agenda and said, okay everyone, have a good day. And this was a Zoom meeting, bye. And it was just as if, what just happened? Like there was no wrap up, there was no debrief, there was no, any of you know the plot of a short story? That's the English teacher in me. Okay. There was no falling action. Do you remember the rising action, the climax, and the falling action, and the denouement, right? The conclusion. Okay, there was no falling action. We went straight from climax to denouement, the conclusion. What just happened, right? It's awkward. It feels strange. Something's missing. So if you attend events at adult facilities, they will announce last call, right? Last call doesn't mean we're closing right now. It means if you would like to get a beverage, this is your last chance to do so, right? And I'm not just making that story up. That was actually an example given in one of these books, and I thought that's a perfect example for college students, okay? Because when I was in college, I was familiar with announcements like that, right? I certainly heard those once or twice. There are last songs at wedding dances. Right? It's not the end, but it's the announcement that the end is coming. This is the last dance. This is the last song that's going to be played by the band or the DJ or whatever. Everyone get up and dance. Now you know the end is coming. So make sure that you don't close without a closing. Some advice on how to close. There's some different opinions on this, and I want to share who those are from because there's context there. Rogoborg, remember, is the business professor, and he's going to say, he says, go to the logistics. What is a review of the discussion that we had in this meeting? What are the next steps? How can we wrap things up? Okay. What are the next steps and who's responsible for what and what are the deadlines for those? That's really important. What needs to be done, who's going to do it, and by when? Priya Parker, remember her book is called The Art of Gathering. It's about all kinds of gatherings. Says you should not end with logistics, just like you shouldn't begin with logistics. You should end with something inspiring, okay, something more fun. One thing we're doing on the Faculty Development Committee to reconcile these two things this year is I've asked the faculty at this university to answer a quick survey question. It's called Teaching in 10 Words. Okay? They're supposed to describe teaching in 10 words. And so that will go out, and I will collect those, and we'll review those, and then we're going to share those at the end of our faculty development meetings after we go over logistics. Okay? And obviously I'm going to be sharing inspiring examples, maybe some comedic examples, but nothing that's negative, terribly I think that those aren't even going to come in because people who feel that way probably aren't going to participate. But anything that's wildly negative, I'm not going to share because the purpose is something inspiring. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Well, here's teaching in 10 words from the university faculty. Okay, so we'll just put that on the agenda. Okay, and so that will be our inspiring closing. After the meeting, this is where you go back and you loop in those important people who were not invited for whatever reason, and you say, here's what we decided. You can make the decision about what to share based on that person and your relationship with that person. If you're in a reporting relationship, you might be sharing different information than if that's just a colleague, okay, or a fellow student, or someone who just missed it, okay, for whatever reason, just missed the meeting. But share with them what was decided, major outcomes. Summary emails, it really helps to send. I try to save next steps for a summary email because it's in writing, which helps people. You know, here are the next steps, here are the responsible parties. The first committee meeting of each year, we establish our subcommittees, and we tell them all to have a meeting before our next broad committee meeting. They need to meet as subcommittees, and they need to come up with one goal for the year. Okay, usually they come up with several. Deadlines for the next steps and the planning for the next meeting, whether that's just a poll that goes out in that email. It's really nice if you can include minutes in that email right away. So if you create minutes in a shared space, like a Google Doc or Microsoft Teams shared document or anything like that, you can send out those minutes immediately and ask people to look them over and suggest any corrections at the next meeting. Okay? And then make sure you follow up on those parking lot items. If you don't follow up on parking lot items, then when you tell people, let me pin that for later, they're not going to believe you, right? So that's a credibility factor. Make sure you follow up on those. One example that's given as kind of a wind down that I really like, because I actually know someone on this campus who does it, which made me wonder if they read the Priya Parker book. Priya Parker refers to someone who needs to stay on schedule and has a hard time doing so because she just has that many meetings, and has their administrative assistant or professional knock on their door 5 minutes before the end of every meeting they have. So I read this in this book in 2021, and then I go attend a one-on-one meeting with this person on campus, and 5 minutes before the end of our meeting, here's a knock on the door, and I say, oh, I know what you're doing, right? So it's not the meeting's ended, it's, Nicole, you've got 5 more minutes with this person who's in a leadership position to ask them anything you need to ask, and then they've got to get to the next thing, okay? So that's kind of a nice example. The resources I use, besides what you see there, the slides are just from Slides Carnival, which I tend to like. Any questions you have?
So for some of the meetings where we don't even quite have the 8, how do you make it still a productive meeting with, we'll say, like 5 people?
Oh, sometimes I think that's easier. But the question is this, how big is the group that's, is it only 5 showed up out of 10?
It's usually just the officers. So yeah, it's...
Oh, okay. So if are there supposed to be a lot more people there and they weren't able to make it?
No, there's usually 5 to 7, just depends.
Okay. So these are all people in leadership positions in this case, right? Okay, so what's the purpose of those people? If you think about the purpose being the bouncer, what's the purpose of the officers in the organization, and what's the purpose of them at that meeting? Is it to make broad decisions for the organization? We had, is this for a student org?
No, not this.
Okay.
The community one.
Oh, you're from Hayes Public Library, aren't you? Yeah, welcome. I'm so glad to see people on campus from the community. So when I was president of Staff Senate, we scheduled 10, our bylaws said that we had to have the agenda out to all staff members 1 week before Staff Senate meetings. So 10 days before every Senate meeting, I went ahead and just scheduled automatically for the year, because that's just easier, a meeting of the executive team. And at that meeting of the executive team, I shared my draft agenda with the items in red that I was going to share that wouldn't be on everyone's agenda, and I asked for feedback. What was I forgetting? What was I not thinking of? Who did we need to bring to the meeting, if anyone? So that was about 10 days before our meeting. But our purpose, in this case, one of our biggest purposes was to plan for that meeting. When I was chairing that regional organization, our plans were all about planning for the conference, and it was our 20th anniversary as an organization. So the steering committee, that was kind of hard because you had 20 people on the steering committee, which let me tell you, is a lot of cooks in the kitchen sometimes, right? But in that case, our meetings were all about planning. So we had committees reporting, And we did have executive team meetings, and those were all about how we were going to, because we had kind of some, not everyone being super nice, and so some of our meetings were about how we were going to get people to understand norms of collaboration, how we were going to handle things if people tried to derail the conversation. We made plans, and we talked ahead of time. If you know parliamentary procedure, it helps a lot. Because we would talk to each other and say, okay, don't worry, if someone does something, I will call out of order. Anyone in a group can say out of order. You don't have to be an officer. That's one of the beautiful things about Robert's rules. You can say, Grace, you're out of order, okay? And then the chair of the meeting, whether it's the president, the vice president, whoever's sitting in that place, can decide what to do in that situation, right? Or you could call someone out of order. But often the person who's leading the meeting has too much going on in their head to handle something like that. So if you have a group of people meeting that has some difficulty, work with your executive team to say, how are we going to handle this conversation so it stays on track, it stays polite and cordial and collegial, and we get things done. Okay? If you don't have a problem with people getting along, then I would say just look at the purpose. What's the purpose of the executive team meeting separately from the organization? Fortunately, you can get a lot more done in a meeting with 5 people. And it's harder to do social loafing. Do you guys know what social loafing is? Can you guess from the name of it? Checking out. If you have a meeting of 50 people, it's a lot easier to engage in social loafing. 5 people, smaller. What else? Yeah.
If you already have an established group that meets pretty regularly and you're integrating new people into that group, what's the best way to make that environment positive and collaborative for everybody, including those new people?
Yeah, so I would recommend, and I don't know if you have any faculty members, any professors who do this, but I would recommend norms of collaboration. Look at, this was what I'd recommend. Do what you want, of course, is just an idea. I would look at those standard ones, and then I would have that group together come up with their own norms of collaboration. So when I'm talking to students on campus, I used to teach diversity in the US, which can be a tough class. We talk about all different kinds of issues related to class, gender, wage issues, police brutality, some tough topics. So I began the semester with talking about what are the rules for how we're going to talk to one another in this class. And I have students use something like Mentimeter or Poll Everywhere, where they can anonymously say, here are things that I've seen in other classes that I didn't like, here's what I'd like to see in this class. So I think if you're bringing in new people especially, they're going to feel like they have more ownership if everyone gets to form those norms of collaboration together. And then if people get out of line, point back to those. Put them on the meeting agenda if you have to. Point them out. I would put, in old Blackboard, when we had the menu bar, I would actually put them in the menu bar. I felt like they were that important. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. I'll hang around for a little bit afterwards in case you have questions you'd like to ask one-on-one. If you'd like more handouts to share or to draft ideas for another meeting, I have plenty up here because I didn't know how many to expect, so I made like 40. And otherwise, have a good night.
Let's do our, give her a round of applause and we're going to do our drawing.
Oh, you have a drawing.
So we have a lovely meeting notebook that was recommended.
Oh, is this the one I recommended?
I think it's very similar, yeah.
Okay. 909? 6909? How far do we have to go? Does someone have 909?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
There you go. Thanks, Michelle.